Hey all you market inventors, I had a great opportunity to meet with Pat Gelsinger, CEO of VMware, at the PFB Solutions launch event a couple weeks ago. And I wanted to share this with you because as we talk about market inventors don't always have to be someone who was the founder or invented a product. A lot of market inventors grow up through their corporate careers, and Pat Gelsinger is a great example of this. Many people may not know about Pat Gelsinger's background, but he was actually born on a farm and went from the farm to Silicon Valley when he was very young, actually 18 years old, and got a job with Intel. Within Intel, he had great mentors and grew up to be the first CTO for Intel, then went over and eventually became the new CEO for VMware. And his numbers have been spectacular. He's actually turned around a lot of the numbers for VMware, and he's really been able to invent new markets in all these different companies. So I got a chance to dig in with him, what he believes takes to be a market inventor, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks. Everyone, thanks for having us. This is exciting. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Mom and Dad are happy to see me, so you're a good excuse.
That's right. So I'm actually from the Washington, D.C. area originally, and moved up here a few years ago, and moved to Germany, back for several large corporations, and so I'm a little bit of the black sheep of the family too, being away from the family, but I had the opportunity to live all over the world, and I got to say, Central PA has been a wonderful home. So
very good, very good. My mom keeps reminding me of that.
So. Yeah. So I'm lobbying for you. I'm trying to get them back here. So you covered a lot, and I was just hoping maybe you could kind of walk us through your personal journey, a little bit more detail, and I think it was a great overview of how you got to where you are today. But let's start with, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, I only really had two different career ambitions. One was to be a farmer like Dad. Okay. Right? And the other was to be an architect. Right. And, I think my mom still has, I designed her a house when I don't know how old I was. I was 12 years old. I wrote out, designed Mom a house. It was over a creek so that I could fish outside of the window without ever leaving the house. Yeah. And anyway, but so those were, I was a pretty simple kid that way. I think I was, God gave me a good aptitude, and I was a little bit bored, so I was a little bit of a troublemaker as well, and I wasn't particularly challenged in high school. And the first time I touched electronics, I got excited. Okay. The first time I touched a computer, I was hooked. Right. That is what I wanted to work on.
And when was that? When did you know that?
So when I was in ninth grade at Conrad Weiser, I went to Berks Votech. Okay. Right, and did was in the electronics technology course at Berks Votech. Mm-hmm. And that's when I, had my first opportunity, and I was sort of a tinkerer, I'd take radios apart, get some of them back together, right, try to fix TVs, those kind of things. The garage looked like a leftover, parts store, and Mom would humor me in the basement. I almost killed my brother one time as he touched the high voltage output of that. So anyway, I thought he should be dead anyway at the time, but I was not very happy. So, but I just really got into electronics at a young age, and when Intel came recruiting it, it became a pretty easy answer, even though I had no desire to move west.
Yeah. So what was it like going out west? How old were you? 17, 18?
18 years old when I moved to California. I had a couple of other guys from the tech school from Lincoln Tech that moved out with me, and literally, my first day, right? I get there. You've ever heard of lowriders? Right, these funky cars. Mm-hmm. So I pull up into a stoplight in Santa Clara. Right next to me is this car that has this music. The car is shaking, right? Right. And the other side of me is a car that's bouncing, right? It's a lowrider at the stoplight, and I am like, I am not in Pennsylvania anymore. Right? These folks are really nuts out here. And then, so I started at Intel, and literally I'm at Intel, I think, 10 working days, and we had our first earthquake, right? And I think I left skid marks on the floor. I hit the the instructor at this says get under the table. Man, bam, I am under the table. And if I would have had money for a plane ticket, I think I would have never stayed in California. So that was my welcome to California. Boombox, low riders, and earthquakes. So they're like, this is pretty rude. And I had one good event that happened that first 2 weeks or so. Went into a church and met Linda, and that became the love of my life. So that was the only good news there. So.
Yeah. How many years have you been married now?
35 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank
awesome.
you. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, 35. When we got married, we said we're going to try it for 50 years, and then we'll decide if we want to stick to it. So, we got 15 years to go on that initial contract.
So you walked us through some of your background as far as your intel, the inventions you brought to market in many ways, from the 386 all the way through Wi-Fi to USB. How old were you at this point when you kind of brought the first chip to market and us?
Yeah, so the 386, I'm 22 when I was, we were taping out the 386, 22, 23, became the 486 design manager, and just tell maybe just a brief story here. So I had finished my bachelor's, I was working on my master's, and I was committed to go do my PhD. And mom and dad kept saying, finish your PhD, they don't even know what a PhD is, but it was finish your PhD. And she's shaking her head. She's not happy with me now. Oh well, so much for Thanksgiving dinner. So, so I quit Intel to go finish my PhD, right at the time. And Andy Grove comes to me and he says, "Do you want to go learn in the simulator, or you want to fly the jet?" And so at 24 years old, he makes me the design manager of the 8046. Wow. Arguably the most important chip project going on in the industry at the time, and I am the youngest person on the design team. Literally, nobody in the design team is younger than me, and I'm in charge, right? So this, huge opportunity to lead, right, the 486. And I'll say that was the first really big break. Yeah. The combination of Andy as a mentor and then making me the 486 design manager. And didn't finish my PhD. I got an honorary doctorate a few years ago, so that was finally to finish my, satisfy mom and dad there. But, the idea of education, both of them were one-room, 8th grade schoolhouses, so that was really huge. Right, that opportunity to go to school was enormous, and to do so in the context of being able to literally go to Stanford by day and use it at night. Yeah, what an extraordinary learning experience. In fact, one time I was in a design class at Stanford, and this professor had this sort of breakthrough. I went and tried it literally on the 386. Yeah. It didn't work. So I go back to class, the Stanford professor, the next day, and I basically describe your design doesn't work, right? Again, a little bit of that Pennsylvania, right? And we got into an argument that lasted 3 class periods. Oh, wow. He and I arguing about why this did or didn't work. Little did I know he was about to publish a book with this as one of the key breakthroughs in his book, right? So not only was I undermining this professor curmudgeon at Stanford, right? I was destroying one of the seminal breakthroughs of his new book by arguing that it didn't work in an actual design context. So anyway, it was really...
You tested it before it went to the market. So
yeah.
That's an important part of the process, right? So around age 31, I've heard you say that you kind of took a year off to develop your own personal mission statement. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, and it was interesting because at about 30 years old, not that I had necessarily written it down formally, but I wanted to be an inventor. Right. Well, at this point, I've had several, I had several patents, so I'm an inventor. Right. I wanted to write a book, and did you read my first book?
No, I haven't.
Programming the 8386. It's a thriller. Yeah. Right. Right. So I'd written my first book. Right. I became the.
You have 2 books, right?
I have 3 books.
3 books now.
Yeah. And working on number 4. And I had wanted to become a vice president for it. I became the youngest vice president of the company. So there's sort of these unwritten things I wanted to get done. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm 30 years old and am I done? Yeah. right? It became sort of that wandering period. It's probably, how some people feel a midlife crisis. I was just an early bloomer. I felt it at 30 years old. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And out of that came this idea of a personal mission statement, reading, and some mentoring and so on. And at that point, wrote my personal mission statement, and that sort of became, the defining, that's what I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. And that's really guided, pretty much the last 25 years of my life since then.
And is it the same today as it was?
Well, as I think about as I advise people to do it, I think everybody should write one. You have, what's your most important resource? Your time. You should be explicit about what you want to do with your time and how you want to apply it and what things you don't want to apply to. Right? Almost all of us waste large portions of our time on things that aren't on our priority list. So get very explicit about that. And when you write a mission statement, it should be good for sort of the next decade.
Right.
Right, and there are things that were different when we were in the early childhood years versus when they were teenagers versus now the grandparenting years. But the modifications have been modest. I'm on version Mission 6B at this point. Right, so I've done about 6 revisions of it over time. The first 3 went really fast. The others have been fairly methodical over time, and they should feel the same. Right, even. But when you get into the grandparenting, when I first wrote it at 30 years old, I was not worried, about the livelihood, the spiritual success, et cetera, of my grandchildren, right? So those type of things start to come to fore as you just, go through life. But it should be, a fairly, stable piece of work that really defines who you are, what your values are, what you want to get done, and who you want to be remembered as.
Yeah. That's awesome. And faith has been a big part of your life.
Yeah, I became a Christian when I was 18 years old. That's been a central thesis for our family, God, family, work. Most of us live work, family, God, right? And doing that, one of the, been real involved. Linda and I are highly philanthropic as well. We made a commitment when we were, soon after we got married, that we'd give an increasing percentage of our gross income to charitable and the Lord's work. That was over 30 years ago. Right?
What are you up to now?
Closing in on 50%.
50%, wow.
Right, and it started out as 10% of nothing. It's now 50% of a lot. And CEOs are overpaid, so I'm overpaid, happy with that. But God's honored that, and we've helped start ministries as well. One of those, Stadia, they're going to do 150 church plants this year. We just visited one of those in Kenya. Some of the schools and work that we started in the slums of Kenya. We now have 15,000 kids in the schools that we helped to start in the slums of Kenya. Another one is TBC, which is Transforming the Bay with Christ. 4 little factoids about the Bay Area. It's now the richest area on planet Earth, highest per capita income. It is one of the least philanthropic areas in the nation. It is one of the least churched areas in the nation. And it's one of the most influential areas on the planet. So as I call it, my mission field is rich, influential, miserly pagans. And we started this organization, 501c3, called Transforming the Bay with Christ. You can go online and look at it, www.tbc.city. You can look at it. It has 3 goals: to unify the Christian leadership of the Bay Area, to amplify works of service to the Bay Area, and to multiply the churches of the Bay Areas.
That's awesome. So changing gears a little bit, mentor is great, late and great Andy Grove. Can you share a good story? You told us about it when you went in there and accused them of not being able to keep up with your hardware, right? But what would be probably one of your best stories that would probably taught you a lot about yourself and influenced where you want to go, where you are today?
Yeah, and Andy was, just an incredible man. And he would, a number of people, and myself being one of those, that he sort of reached way down the organization, and plucked us out, and really mentored and challenged us. And I remember one time, Andy and I went to see Bill Gates and Jim Alchin. right? Was one of the key executives. And so here I am, front row seat with two of the most dominant figures of the technology era at that time. Yeah. Right? And Bill Gates is a he's a very bright man, right? Extremely smart guy, right? So I have a really bright guy, Andy Grove, right, doing an intellectual battle, right? And these are like two rams coming at each other and butting heads, right? In the middle of this conversation, Bill Gates is so infuriated with us, literally he takes his shoes off, right, and is banging on the table, right, with the shoe, right? I can even, I mean, here's Bill and Andy going at it. I have a front row seat to this. Like, wow, what on earth is going on here? And when we're going, back and forth and this kind of thing. Again, I have a front row seat to this. I mean, there's 4 people in the conference room and yelling and arguing and so on, and the early shaping of the PC industry. And as we're leaving this meeting, right, again, it was just one of those phenomenal, right, kind of meetings. And as we're leaving this meeting, I turned to Andy. I says, "Wow, you were so calm, right, in the face of his tirade." And he said, "That's nothing, right? Yeah. I've looked at dictators." Yeah. And it didn't strike me until quite a bit of time later that he was a Hungarian refugee who came to the United States, that literally he looked in the eyes of Hitler. Wow. Right, and here was a man of such extraordinary personal character, that he was a refugee, from the Eastern Bloc countries, came here when he was, I think, 15 when he came to the United States, and it's sort of like, okay, right, he has looked in the eyes of pure evil. Yeah. And so it's like Bill Gates' tirade, he's just a kid.
So shifting a little bit to more the VMware, you shared the story how you became the CEO. What was it like in the early days when you first transitioned into your first real full CEO role?
Yeah, becoming the CEO, I mean, it's described as it's a lonely job. Yeah. It is. In that sense, and because imagine a Friday afternoon, right? Your chief counsel comes by and says, "We were sued this week, but don't worry, Pat, I got it under control." Yeah. Okay, right? Your chief sales head comes by and it says, "Looks like that deal's going to slip out of the quarter, and the numbers are looking shaky, but don't worry about it, Pat. I got it under control." And then your head of R&D comes by on the way out of the door and he says, we found a few bugs this week. I think we're going to miss the release date, but don't worry about it, Pat. I got it under control. Right? By the end of Friday night, you're like, "Why are you telling me all this if you got it under control?" Right? And it's shared anxiety. Yeah. And then you're sitting here on Friday night and you're sort of saying, "Am I going to call the board of directors on this?" Right. No. Right. Right? I mean, that's my job, right, as well. So who are you going to call? Yeah. Right? And, and maybe you got other personnel issues and all of those kind of things. It really is that seat of responsibility, right, of ultimate accountability as well. And I sort of joke that, a well-performing CEO, a well-performing company, right, the board cannot fire the CEO. A poorly performing company, the board cannot keep the CEO. Right? It's pass-fail, right? At that level. And with it, you have responsibility, clarity of objectives for it, and you have the opportunity to truly shape the strategy and the culture of a company as no one else does. And, the early days of VMware, I get there, this extraordinary product, and it was flattening. We got to 80% market share, 80% penetration. Where do you go? Right, you can't keep growing at that rate. You're not going to be 160% market share, right? At that level, our strategy for what we were going to do past core virtualization was pretty, confused and not underway. I had to do a downsizing of the company, a reshaping of the strategy. The streets, Wall Street is looking at us like yesterday's news. Customers, are you part of my past or part of my future? All of those kind of things. So, building a company strategy in your first 2 years as CEO, you are accountable for everything, and the first 2 years, nothing that you do makes a difference.
Right.
It's all based on what was happening well before you got there. Right, so you're accountable for it. You get, applause for the things that go well. You get condemned for the things that go badly, and you had no ability to influence it. Ain't that a great job? Right? And then your strategies, your team, and so it really starts to kick in. Years 2 and 3. Then we're faced with this big Dell EMC. What's the end game of EMC? So that sort of puts us in turmoil. In February of last year, before the Dell EMC deal closes, within 1 week, the following 5 headlines come across the newswire. Pat is being fired.
Yeah.
Pat is going to run EMC. Pat is getting spun out with VMware as a separate and independent company. VMware is getting merged and consolidated, and Michael Dell is going to fire him.
Right.
Okay, all of those 5 within about a 1 week period. So literally, I'm at a conference where Michael and I are about to go on stage like this.
Yeah.
Michael and I are sitting together in the front row, and I get a headline from my head of communications saying that Michael's about to fire you.
Oh, man.
So I lean over to Michael, I show him my cell phone, and says, "Is there something I don't know?" Yeah, that was sort of fun.
The past year or so has been, there's been some real highs and some lows. So
Yeah.
what are some of the personal things that you do to get you through some of those, I guess, those darker days, those road bumps? I mean,
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, the personal behaviors or habits you do?
Yeah, clearly, family is important.
Yeah.
Faith is critical. Hey, I work for the Lord Jesus Christ, and right,
Yeah.
and if things go badly, He's still on the throne. If they go well, He's still on the throne, right? Right. If I get fired, right. Those things that if you put yourself in the eternal context, it's sort of like, okay, right. You need to show up for work every day that way. Having good mentors as well.
Yeah.
My lead independent director, Paul Sagan. Some days I would just call him up and then he'd say, "Anything else?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And he said, "Anything else?" "No, I think that's it." He says, "Okay, now how are we going to handle this?" Right? Let's get back to work. And when you're going through those bad, you just need that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You need that stable, calm influence to help guide you through. The other thing is, you're not just going through it, the entire company is going through it, right? Your entire team is going through it as well. And a pastor friend of mine, said this quite a few years earlier, and I've just kept it as one of the mottos that I live by. I must be encouraged so I can be an encouragement. Mm-hmm. And, the idea that when you show up to your place of leadership, right? If you show up looking like it's crap and the world is falling apart, everybody looks at you and says, "It must be worse than I thought it was."
Right.
Right? If you show up and you're, energized, looking to the future, et cetera, not a false, not a false panacea, right? We got challenges, but hey, here's a strategy, here's what we're going to execute, looking to the future. Everybody's going to say, "Oh, I thought it was pretty crappy, but he knows more than I do, and it must be better than I thought." Right, you get to set the tone for the entire organization, and that's your responsibility, of leadership, is to be guiding through and, looking to the other time, articulating the vision of where we're going to be on the other side of those transitions, those difficult times. And done well, it empowers the entire organization.
So, any advice to your younger self?
To my younger self?
Yeah.
So, when, the first almost 20 years of my career, I prioritized results over relationship. Mm. And it wasn't, and I didn't think of myself, it wasn't like I was trying to be, right, a pain in the, what, right? But, it's like you were either helping me or you were slowing me down. So which is it? Right? And if you're slowing me down, get out of my road and I'm going to run you over because I am going to get my projects done, my chips, all of that kind of stuff. I was just manic. It was, this, Pennsylvania air, right? I don't know. I just was, And in that, it wasn't that I didn't care about other people, but I sure didn't prioritize the relationship, the win-win opportunities, and making sure that, I was bringing them on the journey with me. And the people on my team loved working for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Oh my gosh, it's just like, literally the 46 project that I ran soup to nuts. In a 4-year project, we only had 3 people leave, right, out of over 200 people. right, over 4 years. I mean, this was family, right? I mean, we played baseball together, we did picnics together. I mean, we were going to get that chip done. Now if you weren't on my team, you didn't like me very much.
Right.
Right, as well. And I'll just say, so to my younger self, right, the value of relationships is far more sustainable than any individual result or project on the way.
So that's great. That's great advice. So what are you working on now to prepare you for your next opportunity?
Well, as a CEO, right, it's not like there's another rung on the ladder.
Yeah.
Right, at that level. So, it really is, to me, sort of my daily job now is, I have 22,000 people that look to my leadership. Mm-hmm. And how do I make sure I'm the very best CEO?
Right.
Right, and things like, I was at this Wall Street Journal CEO Council yesterday. Who do I see as CEOs that I respect? And what am I doing to do those things as well?
Right.
And the CEO job is one where, right, you get there based on certain strengths. Typically, maybe it's finance, maybe it's products, mm-hmm. Maybe it's sales. But when you're there, you have to be very horizontal.
Yeah.
Right? You have to look across every different function. And, I know more about talking to Wall Street today than I thought I'd ever want to. Right? I'm actually quite sure it's more than I ever wanted to at this point. But hey, that's important.
Yeah.
I have 22,000 employees and their families who are looking at the score, right? Our stock price today. I don't know how we're doing today anyway. I didn't check yet. So, but right, those things matter.
Yeah.
Right? Legal things, those things matter. The care and feeding of the board of directors, right? How do I, manage them and navigate them to, right, support and direct us? I'm uniquely responsible, for that in the company. And, some things are, come naturally to you in that role. Right, the strengths that got you there, but you have to overemphasize all of the other skills that you didn't have to get to that role and really focus on those areas, even though you may not like those as much.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell me why you're so excited about PFB Solutions? We talked about it earlier. So.
Yeah, and I really think, and we view this as a broad set of partnerships for VMware, but every time that people are saying, how do I apply technology and bringing it to my business, to me, the best parts of my day, just explaining to you why I need to spend more time on the things I don't like as much, but to me, the two best parts of my day are if I'm meeting with engineers talking about products, mm-hmm. or if I'm meeting with customers on how they use our products.
Right.
Right. And to me, PFB Solutions, it's about how do you use the products? How do you use the technology? How do you solve new problems? And that stuff gets, really quite thrilling because, there's a lot of those pieces that I don't look at every day. Oh, how do you, and seeing where technology has come for rural America and how it's being applied in farming and other sectors, the productivity benefits that come from it, now some of the big data and analytic kind of capabilities that you have, hey, this is really exciting. I was mentioning outside, I was with a customer, I was in India 3 weeks ago, and I had a customer on stage, Chitale Farms. And literally their motto is clouds to cows.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great.
Right? And this is the most rural area of one of the most impoverished countries in the world. There's more, I think today there are more people living in extreme poverty in India than any country in the world. I think that's a true statement. I think it's a little bit more than Indonesia. Yeah. I think those are battling out for the most impoverished nations on earth. And almost all of the impoverished people are rural farmers.
Right.
Right, as well. Very, very high correlation there as well. So here's a startup company, right, that is focused on how do we bring technology to the most rural of farmers in India. Yeah. Right, so those kind of stories, they just excite me. Right, and being able to raise the quality, the standards of living, improve the abilities of every human on the planet, and I get excited about that.
That's awesome. So our interview's done. However, we have questions from the audience. Thanks everyone for watching this video. If you got another great idea for someone I should interview or a topic I should cover around the market invention or market inventors, please drop me a line. And stay tuned for more video. Thank you.